To international news now, worldwide concerns as the US says Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman has immunity from the Jamal Khashoggi illegal case. The State Department says he has immunity due to his new role as Saudi Prime Minister. Khashoggi, a journalist, was murdered at the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, in Turkey, back in 2018. We get the very latest on this development from US correspondent Simon Marks, who joins us from there. Simon, thanks for your time this evening. This news has made international headlines. Obvious big disappointment from the murdered journalist's fiancé who has brought this case. But many saying if you look at how the US has tried very hard to mend their relationship with Saudi Arabia, it's not a surprise.
No, I mean, it is pretty extraordinary, isn't it, when you consider the depths to which that relationship went into the deep freeze immediately after the murder and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, with American intelligence coming forward and saying they believed Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman was the architect of the entire plot to kill Jamal Khashoggi. For a while, it substantially derailed the US relationship with Saudi Arabia. But then Joe Biden, of course, found himself within the last few months in need of Saudi assistance as he sat and watched the price of petrol ticking up at America's petrol pumps, and he made that controversial journey to Saudi Arabia, engaged, of course, in a fist bump with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who since then has been appointed Prime Minister of Saudi Arabia. And that, according to the State Department, is the critical moment at which the Crown Prince could assume that immunity conferred to him. So they've gone to the court in which Jamal Khashoggi's fiancée was seeking to launch that lawsuit against Jamal Khashoggi, and said he is the Prime Minister of a sovereign nation. Just like any Prime Minister anywhere in the world, he is covered by immunity, which has led within the last couple of hours to an absolutely furious response from the publisher of the Washington Post, the newspaper for which Khashoggi used to write. Fred Ryan has issued a statement accusing the US government of granting a license to kill one of the world's most egregious human rights abusers. And this statement from the publisher of the Washington Post specifically says it is President Biden who is granting that license to kill to Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. They've not even said it's the State Department that's doing it. They've gone straight for President Biden himself. The Saudis' decision, says Fred Ryan, to make the Crown Prince Prime Minister was a cynical, calculated effort to manipulate the law. President Biden is turning his back on fundamental principles of press freedom and equality. That is a stinging statement from the publisher of Joe Biden's hometown newspaper, the Washington Post.
How are you expecting this to be read or reacted to internationally, though? Obviously, so many countries represented in Washington. Just a few days ago, I remember broadcasters in the UK focusing on the fact that Rishi Sunak had met with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia and did not bring up the Jamal Khashoggi case. And then when the Prime Minister's official spokesperson was asked about it, he merely said he didn't raise specific individual cases. It seems that these international powers are wanting to sort of just leave the elephant in the room during these very, very tough economic times where everybody's trying to get oil at the best price.
Yeah, and remember, we're not even sure that the elephant was escorted into the room when President Biden met Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. President Biden claimed that he challenged the Crown Prince, and when the Crown Prince denied having anything to do with the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, Joe Biden said, "I told him I didn't believe him." But Saudi officials who witnessed that encounter said President Biden never brought it up. So that's never been fully explained, although the Americans would argue the Saudis had good reason to say that President Biden never brought it up. Look, I think the message from Washington, D.C. to the rest of the world has been unmistakable over the last few months. And that is that the relationship with Saudi Arabia and the supply of Saudi oil into world markets is more important than considerations that relate to Saudi Arabia's human rights record, and particularly to Jamal Khashoggi. I mean, there's no other way to read what the Biden administration has done over the last 2 or 3 months, and it was done at precisely the moment when President Biden was preparing for midterm elections that, of course, just wrapped up here, and was worried that as the price of petrol at the pumps soared to $5, $6 a gallon in some places, that was politically unsustainable. But remember that in recent weeks, the Saudis then pulled the rug out from under President Biden and decided to curb oil production rather than expand it, a move that absolutely infuriated the White House and led the State Department of the White House to say they are looking anew at the relationship between the United States and Saudi Arabia. There are many analysts here who quite literally say the Saudis have got the United States over a barrel.
It's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch the repercussions of that big decision. But before I let you go, some news coming in just before we cross to you, or just a bit earlier, out of the US, that the Department of Justice has appointed a special prosecutor to lead this big investigation into Donald Trump. That's a big announcement, isn't it? They're not letting up on this, are they?
Yeah, this is big news, Marcel. We'd been expecting a development because remember that Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, said that no criminal charges would be brought against Donald Trump within a 60-day window of America's midterm elections. Well, that window's shut. Donald Trump has now announced that he's a candidate for re-election in 2024, which obviously is a political move because he wants to get out ahead of other Republican contenders. But it was also a legal move because he wanted to complicate life for the Department of Justice. So now Merrick Garland, the Attorney General, is saying that because this is such a hot potato politically, the Department of Justice is going to put these 2 investigations into the hands of an independent special prosecutor. The investigation into the January the 6th uprising and whether President Donald Trump fomented it, and the investigation into Donald Trump's handling of those classified documents that somehow managed to make their way to his Mar-a-Lago estate rather than to the National Archives where they should have gone. Now, this independent prosecutor will have an office, he'll have a staff, he'll be able to depose witnesses. This could take months to reach a conclusion, and it very clearly indicates to every journalist here in town and every Republican up on Capitol Hill that Donald Trump and his claims that he's being persecuted by the Department of Justice absolutely are not going away and are going to remain a very voluble topic of conversation here well into 2023.
Indeed, it will be. That's our correspondent in Washington, Simon Marks, with the latest news coming out of the United States. We thank him for his time this evening.